Tom, are you okay?
I lost her.
Her?
She was going to be this epic, trilogy-worthy character. I was going to be the hottest writer in Hollywood. But I can't get past Act 1!
You need some writers group therapy. Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers. Are you ready for your session? The doctors are in. And if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends. You can find us online at writersgrouptherapy.com, also on Twitter and Instagram at WGTherapy, individually.
I'm Tom_Loveman on Twitter, Tom Loveman on Instagram.
And on Instagram, I'm Moonlily Music, and on Twitter, I'm at Roshni Lamino. Let's talk about writing!
Yeah. Good idea. So I get a lot of those. I get several different newsletters with leads for films, film script requests. Like I get Ink Tip. I'm on ISA, Network ISA, International Screenwriters Association. And I also get one called Screenwriter Staffing. So every week I get a newsletter, and it's got one. Sometimes they come every other day or so. Some of them are weekly, where I get anywhere from 6 to 10 different leads of people looking for scripts. And this is the time for the contained script. Everybody wants a low budget contained either drama or thriller or horror. So I thought we should talk about how do you write a contained script and why you'd want to.
I mean, I think the trend was already going that way because it is cheaper. You know, you can keep it in one space, you don't have as many actors, all that stuff. So I get it, but especially now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's always been people. These kind of newsletters are always looking for low budget stuff. There are producers that are looking for things they can do on a cheap. But even more so lately, like out of 10 leads, like 9 of them are all low budget, ultra low budget, contained. They're all like that. So everybody's looking for that. And even now with the production, dealing with COVID-19, they want really small productions because you can control things a lot easier too. You can actually produce something with just a few characters in just a couple locations much easier than you can, something, with a big budget and set pieces and stuff.
Or where you have to travel to different locations as well, that sort of thing, as opposed to staying in one spot for 2 weeks and shooting it out, that sort of thing. Definitely. It's funny, we
Yeah.
talked previously before we started recording about the best contained script films that we've seen. I was having trouble. I only came up with one. You came up with a dozen of them. And I think it's because most of the time they're dramas, they're sci-fis, they're thrillers. I couldn't think of a single rom-com or comedy or anything lighthearted that was a contained one-room script.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can rattle them off. Panic Room is a great one. David Fincher with Jodie Foster. Femke Janssen was in something called 100 Feet, where she's trapped in her house and she can't move more than 100 feet because she's a house arrest kind of thing. Cloverfield, the one with John Goodman and I forget her name. It all takes place in a bunker. Those are 2 characters in a bunker for the whole movie, pretty much. Super, claustrophobic kind of thing, like literally contained script.
Yeah, the only one I could really think of was Wait Until Dark, which is a Audrey Hepburn, Alan Arkin film. But they do still show a few different locations before they get into the meat of the film. So there's still 2 separate locations. And it's based off a stage play, which is why I think it translated so well to the whole contained script or contained room script thing. But yeah, there are a few extra locations now that I think about it, but it's mostly one room.
Yeah, I started to write one that was set on a subway car that gets accidentally switched into an alternate dimension, and it's a horror film where the monsters are trying to get in, and they have to try to get the subway car back to their own dimension. But while I was writing it, I happened to come across someone posted something about someone else was writing a movie about people trapped in a subway car with monsters. Didn't have the alternate dimension aspect, but it was kind of the same story, so I kind of tanked it. But yeah, it was mainly, I was like, okay, where can I put people that they can, have conflict and, tension and not have to run around, they can all be there. So I just have to get them into that place and then they're there.
Yeah.
So you can always have, a couple scenes that aren't in your contained location as long as you
The
you get there
majority
and
of
you
it is
keep them
yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's funny, you reminded me, you were actually like, "Oh, Roshni, you have written a contained script, your game night short film." I'm like, "Oh, yeah." So, just to, give a synopsis of that briefly, it's just a short film about 3 couples who all meet in an apartment to play games, and then they kind of learn how dysfunctional 2 of the couples really are during the course of the night, but it's all in one apartment. So I forgot about that. I was like, "Oh, yeah, you can write a
Yeah,
comedy in one room." Yes.
yeah.
I don't know if it could have worked for a 2-hour film, but it worked for, 5 minutes.
Oh, well, I think you had another a rom-com, and rom-coms in general, I think, while they may not be physically contained, they're contained in budgetary, and they can be contained in casting, because you have one that's only 4 or 5 characters, and it has 1 or 2 busier scenes, like a cafe, and then there's
Mhm.
a large group event at the end. But 90% of the film is really just, 2 people on dates and stuff. So it works, I think.
Now, what I've always understood a contained script to mean, though, was they meant one location or few locations. So are you saying that when you see these breakdowns for scripts that they say contained also means just a small cast and like one location, or is it only location that they care about?
It varies. Usually, sometimes they actually have a location. Like, we want a film that will be set in a cabin in the woods, or in a desert town, because they have a location somewhere.
Mm,
So that's kind of cool when they have that actually in your script matches what they're looking for, because they already have the location and they can control that aspect of it. So, but sometimes it's minimum 3 or 4 locations. Sometimes it's, how many cast members, 3 or 4 cast members. Sometimes they're really specific, like we want something like Saw, where it's in one room, you
yeah.
know, that kind of thing. Yeah. So it varies, but yeah, it can be contained in the aspect of locations, cast. They can obviously, sometimes they say no visual effects or very little. They often focus on character driven. So you have to make sure your characters are really unique and cool and dynamic, because they're going to carry the story, obviously.
Which you should be doing anyway with your scripts, everybody. Character is the
True.
most important thing. That is the hill I will die on as a writer. Character is the most important thing.
There you go.
So let's talk about, I mean, I feel like when you're like, okay, everything has to take place in a living room, you're like, ah, because it feels so limiting. So let's talk about how it's actually not.
Okay.
Now
Since you
go.
brought it up. Yeah, I mean, there's, you're the character person more than I am. I'm more of the plot and action. So I'm more interested in hearing what you have to say. From what I gather, from what I have experienced, it's coming up with that hook, that the idea of what's going to keep this story running for an hour and a half with
Hmm.
these 2, 3, 4 people in this very small location. A lot of times you're going to have to come up with that hook first, obviously, and then you're going to have to structure your characters so that they have their flaws that can create the tension and the conflict that needs to keep going, and
Hmm.
how it's going to, it's still a story just like anything else. You have to have your, beginning, middle, end, your inciting incident, your conflicts, your resolution. So it's just, from what I've done, that is hard. I feel like that's pretty tricky to do in a small space. It's almost like doing a short film, I guess, in some ways, where you have to do all of that in a very short period of time.
Well, I think when you have a contained script, and I think this is why the genre ends up becoming a horror or a thriller or a drama, because not only do you have to have the premise for, let's take as a great example, a murder mystery set in a ski cabin. So you have to have the premise, everyone's going there for a fun ski trip, and they all have, and then the character stuff, so they all have their whatever secrets that they're holding on, and then you have to have a reason to keep them there. Oh, there's a snowstorm. Oh, the power went out. Oh, we ran out of gas in the car. We can't get down the hill until the morning. So you have to have a reason to keep them there for everything to happen, because if people can leave, what's the point of having the film? So I think that's why I was saying a comedy, like, it doesn't make sense. Okay, the lights went out. Everyone's just gonna, like, go party in the hot tub or something, you know? It's so but if you have, like, say, a murder mystery in a contained location like that, it just everything just writes itself. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of it is you
Hmm.
have to have, of course, the characters' backstories and their reasons and their motivations with whatever's happening, why they're there in the first place, and with each other. But you also have to have a compelling reason to keep the characters in that space over the course of time, not just for 5 minutes, but for 3 hours, for everything to blow up and then get resolved.
A good example of that is like The Breakfast Club.
Yeah,
Yeah, the totally unique, different characters who would not otherwise be in the same location if they weren't all in detention in the library. They actually go out into the school a little bit, but most of them are in the library, and they're kind of just testing the waters and interacting with each other and learning about each other and trying to resolve their preconceived notions. And I feel like that's a really good example.
I cannot believe that was a movie I watched so much too. Oh my gosh, growing up. But you know what's
Hmm.
interesting about that one is there really is no plot. That is a character study movie.
True.
So you can do a contained script and not have a plot, and that's fine too.
I guess there's some micro plots within it, the whole evading the principal and sneaking around and stuff like that. But yeah, there's no major overarching plot action that has to
Yeah.
happen. It's all character arc
Mhm.
as they discover each other and how they're more alike than they are different, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can't that's so funny. I can't believe I forgot about that one. It's not of the 3 like Molly Ringwald movies, and that, like, I always think of them as a trilogy. It's not the one that I gravitate towards. Pretty in Pink's probably my favorite from that, like,
Yeah.
era. So I didn't think about it, but yeah, you're right, it is a contained script, but
Hmm.
it doesn't have a plot. So yeah, that's interesting too. I didn't think about that.
So yeah, that even goes further to your idea that character is everything in these kind of stories. Because yeah, you can have a hit classic movie with no plot
Yeah. I
as
mean, and
long as the characters are.
you have to tell the story without special effects, without some deus ex machina, like, it has to be from within because it can't be from without. The story cannot be external.
Yeah. Any other tips on writing contained scripts?
Well, you do a lot of drama and a lot of sci-fi. So how would you do a sci-fi contained script and yet you can't have special effects or very limited special effects?
Well, we did synesthesia. That all took place in one location, which was my apartment. That was a short film, of course, but you could expand it longer. It could definitely be longer. And it was literally one woman and her cell phone most of the time. So, building up the drama in her own mind, basically. She's talking to a non existent entity, kind of creating her own drama within her own space.
Mhm.
So that was kind of unique. Reclamation's kind of contained. That was a pilot for a web series, but even the stuff I'd written after the pilot, where Cassie actually goes into space, it's very contained because you only have her, a pilot of a ship, and an AI kind of avatar guy is your cast, and it's on a ship, so you can kind of contain it via the sets you build, and you can
Mhm.
kind of be creative about doing. I was kind of creative about how they'd be kind of generic, so you wouldn't have to like build that much, just change them into different things. So that's kind of like Moon. Moon's a good example of a drama, sci-fi drama that's real contained. It's Sam Rockwell on the moon with
Mhm.
himself, basically. It winds up being, and a computer, which was Kevin Spacey's voice, actually. Yeah, so I mean, space is a great place to put a contained drama because it's one of the most isolated places in the world. Gravity is basically a contained story, although it's extremely high budget because of the visual effects.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about Gravity too. I did see that one.
Hmm.
I have seen contained scripts. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, not a comedy, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah, so sci-fi, because of if you're going sci-fi out into space, becomes a great place to do contained. In fact, I have some friends and some Kickstarter people, friends through Kickstarter I know that have done these. The Fifth Passenger is out on, I think it's on Amazon now. Is I think 5 characters on a spaceship. It's kind of the lifeboat scenario. They've done that in space where guy's in a spaceship and there's a stowaway and he can't make it to Mars unless he throws the stowaway out the airlock, and he doesn't want to do that. So
Mhm.
that kind of creates the tension in that. So I've seen several of those kind of stories, and they can be, you can kind of build on the genre and tweak it and make it unique. And then horror, like we talked about Saw,
Mhm.
synesthesia. These are, psychological thrillers, not a huge budget in a small space, putting people into peril without having to have them run around the world in like an action movie.
I'm laughing because I'm laughing because one of your earlier statements was, "Space is a great place to have a contained script."
That's kind of ironic. Yeah, but it's true.
It is. But because you're stuck on a ship, even though you're in this vast expanse. Of course,
Yeah.
yeah, Let's discuss one thing that we might see as a trend. Let me just say I hope not. But it would technically be a contained script, but I don't know that it would lend itself well for like high drama and high stakes. People were writing Zoom scripts because it was easy, because it's, the world we live in right now. That is technically contained. You could do like a whole thing on Zoom, but pros and cons. Does it really lend itself to a good element of a contained script?
There have been, before coronavirus came around, there have been scripts that did that. John Cho was in a story, I can't remember what it was called, just last year, where his daughter goes missing and he uses her computer to kind of try to find her.
Oh, I saw that. I know what you're talking about. I forget the name. I
Yeah.
know what you're talking about. I can actually see the poster in my head. We watched it. It was pretty good. I mean, I don't really like watching a computer screen all the time, but
Yeah.
you know.
It's claustrophobic in its own way, but I think in part of, we talked about this just in general when we're talking about our Zoom meetings for writers group and stuff. People are kind of zoomed out,
Mhm.
like we're done with it. We've had enough of that. So I don't know that people really want to see movies like that. It kind of reminds them that they're stuck in their house.
Mhm.
I like sci-fi adventures and action adventure dramas because I want to go places and experience things that I couldn't otherwise experience. I feel like that's people are going to try it. I just don't know how successful it's going to be.
Especially for 2.5 hours. Well, it's interesting because they've actually, with everything happening in the world and the pandemic and the ongoing need to work from home, they have actually determined that when you're FaceTiming or Skyping or doing Zoom meetings, it actually requires the most energy of anything than if you were talking on the phone to someone, than if you were emailing or chatting. And that's part of what's contributing to the whole Zoom fatigue, because it requires just so much of your attention and your brain and your energy. So can you imagine, like, I don't know about you, but when I go see a movie and I'm in a dark theater and I'm immersed in it, I actually sometimes feel really tired afterwards. So can you imagine going to a 2-hour movie where you're already gonna feel tired because you focused so much on it for 2 hours, and it's a freaking Zoom meeting that you watched for 2 hours? Like,
Yeah.
you're just gonna be comatose in the chair when it's done. I don't
No,
know.
I totally understand that. Yeah. I have a bunch of Zoom things I do, and yeah, you feel like you're locked in that chair at your desk, which isn't the most comfortable place to be in the first place.
Mhm.
So to feel that way for 2 hours, when you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because even in a contained script, you know, s I'm trying to think of, because the examples that I gave, even the one you gave, like Breakfast Club, they still change it up a little bit with the scenery. You see them running down the hallway and stuff like that. Even Wait Until Dark, they show the airport and they show, a street at some point. So there's still some change to let your brain sort of relax about it.
Yeah, I mean,
So
contained doesn't have to be, literally locked in a room. There, from a budgetary perspective, it's like a location. A location can have multiple, areas. If you have a
mhm,
school as a location, you have tremendous amount of flexibility to, use that space because you have a gym and you have a pool and you have a lunchroom and you have classrooms. So there's a lot of variety you can have within that. You have an auto shop, but you have to, if you have that, I mean, again, you have to look at contained scripts as almost from a business producing perspective when you're writing it, because you have to think what's the producer going to see when he looks at the script. I wrote basically a low budget paranormal thriller, and I pitch it as a low budget. It's not really contained, but it takes place in 3 or 4 locations. And I wrote it to use very little special effects, although there are some. So I'm kind of on the edge there. So I pitch it and see if people are like it or not, but hasn't sold yet.
So what would be the average budget for a contained script compared to, like, you know, I don't know, maybe this is a bad comparison, but like compared to the Avengers or something like that.
Well, if you take cast out, because sometimes these things are for specific actors, so
Okay.
sometimes that's a if you ignore that and you look at the physical production costs,
Mhm.
usually under 1 million, sometimes a lot of times under half a million,
Mhm.
if it's called quote unquote low budget. Like I feel like I can make my paranormal thriller script for probably 50 to 100,000 even, because I
Wow.
know I wrote it with the locations in mind. Like I know I can go use my cousin's house in Cleveland if I want to. So
Mhm.
it's stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it has 3 or 4 main characters. That it's written to do it that way.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're even ultra low budget where it's like $20,000. So that's probably a situation where they literally have a location already and they just need the story to put into it. So it
Mm.
depends on that.
Mhm. Compared to like a blockbuster movie, which would probably run at least how much?
How
You're better
many?
at numbers than I am.
Well, so there's some, like I would say Deadpool was, I think, 60-ish. Had a lot of marketing as well, but that was theoretically one of the lower budget big action movies
Mhm.
that you could see. They actually joked about it in their marketing and stuff. So, Deadpool is so breaks the wall and stuff. Oh, we didn't have enough money for that. So,
Okay, but like I'm talking like a studio backed release.
yeah. Oh gosh, they're 100 to 300 millions. A lot of those movies.
So you're looking at a script that could theoretically be done for like 500,000 comfortably to something against something that's 60 million.
Yeah.
That's really
Hmm.
sweet to a producer.
Yeah, and and there's always those diamond in the rough kind of things where like the Blair Witch Project kind of thing, it comes out of nowhere with hardly any budget and it goes off to make $100 million. Then if you can, and that's what these up and coming producers and directors are looking for, because they're trying. A lot of these this studios are not really going to these newsletters to pitch their to source their projects. These are smaller producers and smaller directors who are looking for a really good script that they can produce with the money they have and the resources they have to go out and do something to get to that level where they've done their Blair Witch Project and then they get invited to go out and make Jurassic World, or whatever.
Mhm. But even if you did, you know, like tear jump and you went from, Blair Witch to Jurassic World, if you can do it on a shoestring budget and still recoup, because all of that money that the studio is spending has to be recouped before you start seeing anything else, before it starts getting paid out. So, I mean, it's to anyone's advantage for you to do it as low cost as possible.
Yeah, that's the key draw for writers to write right now, especially to write these low
Mhm.
budget contained scripts, because like I said, I get a dozen of these requests a day. So if you've got a script, a good script, and it meets their needs, they're very likely to, at least want to read it and maybe even option it. So, and then
Yeah.
make it.
Yeah.
This isn't a situation we talk about writing for the trend a lot of times, like don't write for the trend.
Mhm.
This isn't like a trend like, shark movies or whatever, the subject matter trend, a
Mhm.
genre trend. This is a system wide, an industry wide trend that's not going away anytime soon, because it's a lot easier right now, especially with the restrictions that are going to be placed on productions and the extra costs involved in running productions in the COVID world. A very smartly written contained script, that can be made now. It's like literally, I think I read a quote. It's like, if we can't make it, don't write it.
Yeah.
If you Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you're thinking this way, do it because it's an option. Do you remember I don't know if you saw the Netflix show, The AO?
I saw it advertised. I never watched it.
It's about several people that are kind of like kidnapped, and they're put in these clear Lexan cubicle, kind of separated. cells. And I thought of that when we were doing this episode, that was
Mhm.
another good example, because they literally contained each cast member in a separate cube. They're blocked off from each other, so they've
Social
got
distancing!
social distance. They're socially
Yeah.
distant in the story. They're kept in these cells that are made of, Lexan, so they're separated. So I feel like that would be a great thing to go back and do now, but it was
Yeah,
done
really.
way before that.
Yeah, this is really a time where I feel like oftentimes as writers, we kind of think, oh, sky's the limit, like let the producer and director figure it out. But this is really a time where if you can think like a director or even better, a producer, you have to. The Hollywood Reporter is great for all the up to the minute updates on what's happening in the industry. But right now, they're thinking of cutting out extras, they're thinking of CGI. Doing CGI extras and things that would, rack up the budget, that would rack up the post production time, all the restrictions about taking people's temperatures and, hand washing breaks, and everyone has to be distant and they can only bring certain people down to the set at a time. That is going to, a production that would normally take, say, a week is going to take 3 weeks. So it starts with you, the writer, and you have to think smart about your script and your story. So everything else down the line can go as fast as possible. Because right now, my estimate is everything's going to take at least 3 times as long to
Well
shoot.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are your ideas for contained stories? Are you writing one? Share it with us and let us know how it's coming along.
We'll see you guys soon.